Well, hello. Welcome to our Wednesday podcast, our Bible study that we meet together. A lot going on at the church as we're rolling towards Labor Day Fair. Excited about that. A lot of good things coming around, a lot of good things happening, and opportunities to be involved. We still have needs for volunteers to sign up. We have a lot of volunteers who don't sign up, and that actually creates more of a problem than it does anything else on that day. So if you could sign up, we'd greatly appreciate it. So we know where you're going to be on that day, and um, we'll look at all that as we go get closer, obviously. But um, this podcast, we're talking about Joseph in the book of Genesis, and we're coming to the end of the book of Genesis. It's only been 29 weeks we have been in the book of Genesis. It's one of the most important books in the Bible, though, because it sets in place all of what the rest of the Bible will make sense. So you need to know where creation came from, where all of the people from the Bible, where the nation of Israel came from. All of that completes the rest of the Bible. So when we talk about different nations, we talk about different things. All of those can be found in the book of Genesis. So we're talking about the Philistines. We're talking about wars with different nations and all this other stuff. Now you know where all those nations came from. You know where they're located in your head on the map. And you can look at the map of Israel and the map of in the back of your Bible. Open up one of those maps and you'll see it for yourself. All the different locations these things took place. So it gives you opportunity to look at all those things and to see them all. Then you get a full picture of the Bible. So even when you get to the book of Revelation, which we already did, but as we go back through all this, you understand where all this came from, who they're talking about, because they're writing it at that time. And so now you got a full picture of the Bible. And we've been in the story of Joseph, which actually ends the book, the story of Joseph. And we were in chapter 47, as we had now gone through Joseph's life. He had been sold into slavery. He had been falsely accused and put in jail. He had then told the dream to the king of Egypt. And now he's rose all the way to the top. He's second in command next to Pharaoh. His brothers who sold him into slavery came back to get food because there's a great famine in the land. He then does this whole thing where he's trying to figure out if his brothers have truly changed or not. He then realizes they have changed, and it becomes an amazing story of forgiveness. And now his father has come to the land. His father has sat down with Pharaoh, and now they're having a conversation between Jacob and Pharaoh, and that's where it picks up this week as we continue to get to the end of Genesis. In 47 and verse 8, it said, Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many years have you lived?" So Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my sojourning are 130. Few and unpleasant have been the years of my life, nor have they attained the years that my fathers lived during the days of their sojourning." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them possessions in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had ordered. Joseph provided his father and his brothers and all his father's household with food according to their little ones. So we see that Jacob has great favor with Pharaoh because of Joseph. And then Joseph does something that's amazing. He doesn't just let his family live there and give them food. He actually gives them the best property in the land so that they can continue to be blessed. So Joseph takes forgiveness an extra mile. It is one thing to forgive, which is to no longer hold it against that person. So in other words, the way you treat them, the way you act you're no longer holding it against them. It's one thing to have that. It's another thing to have the idea of, now I'm going to do good things for you. Now, if you remember Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, he had encouraged his disciples to love their enemies and to do good to those that hurt you. So in other words, Joseph was applying what Jesus would put as a principle in forgiveness and love. So it's just loving people who are good to you isn't enough. Loving your enemies shows that you are a true follower of Jesus. And Joseph, a true follower of God, was applying those very same principles with his family. He wasn't holding grudges. He wasn't attacking them. He wasn't putting them in the worst part of the land. No, instead, he was putting them in the best part of the land. And in verse 13, it says, "Now there was no food in all the land because the famine was very severe. so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. Joseph gathered all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. When the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us food, for why should we die in your presence? For our money is gone." Then Joseph said, give up your livestock, and I will give you food for your livestock, since your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses and the flocks and the herds and the donkeys, and he fed them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. When the year was ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent, and the cattle are my lord's. There is nothing left for my lord except our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before our eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we and our land will be slaves to Pharaoh. So give us seed that we may not live and die, and that the land may not be desolate." So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For every Egyptian sold his field, because the famine was severe upon them. Thus the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he removed them to the cities from one end of Egypt's border to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had an allotment from Pharaoh, and they lived off the allotment which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, "Behold, I have today bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and you may sow the land. At the harvest, you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own for seed of the field, and for your food, and for those of your household, and as food for your little ones." So they said in verse 25, "You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's slaves." Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, valid to this day, that Pharaoh should have the fifth. Only the land of the priest did not become Pharaoh's. So what this means is we have this amazing situation where Joseph obviously orchestrated enough food to survive the bad famine, but people were buying the food, but then they ran out of money. And so now how are they going to get food? So then he came up with, well, some of your livestock. So he sold them their livestock for exchange for food. The next year they had no livestock. Now the famine is coming to an end, but here's what is the situation. They sold them the land and themselves. So they become servants of Pharaoh. So the whole land of Egypt and Canaan, the surrounding lands of Egypt, all the way through Israel, are now owned by Pharaoh. And he has all these people. And what Joseph did was moved all these people to cities. So it was easier to feed them and manage them. So he has this whole network now of amazing setups where he has done all this for Pharaoh. So Pharaoh has all the money of the land and all the property and all the people of the surrounding lands and his own land. In verse 27, it says, "Now Israel lived in the land of Egypt and Goshen, and they acquired property in it and were fruitful and became very numerous. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so that the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time for Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, 'Please, if I have found favor in your sight, place now your hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. Please do not bury me in Egypt. But when I lie down with my fathers, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place.' And he said, 'I will do as you have said.' He said, 'Swear to me.' So he swore to him. Then Israel bowed in worship at the head of the bed." So basically, his last will and testament was that he not be buried in Egypt. He wanted to be buried in Canaan, where, if you remember right, Abraham had got a lot from some people there, and he buried Sarah there, and then he was buried there. And then Jacob's dad was buried there, Isaac, and so forth. So it's like a family plot. Now, I see this a lot in our world around us, actually. Family plots, the idea of having a family burial and wanting to be with your family. Now, you're dead, so it really doesn't make a logical sense other than the fact that it's easier for people to come visit your burial site if the family is all together. I don't know how many people still do that, go to burial sites and gravestones and all that stuff. I know, like, My grandparents are buried in one place. My parents will be buried in a separate. When that happens, I'll be buried. Who knows where? Probably cremated. Um, so it's our culture has shifted a little bit in that. But this is why he wanted to be buried with his ancestors. It was important to them at that time, and I think it was still important up until probably about 40 years ago, where people wanted to be buried with their family together. Um, and it was just important for those kind of purposes. So we see it. It's just not played out in our culture today. Our culture has switched. Now everybody's cremated, or a lot of people are. Very few people are buried, as opposed to cremation. They have memorial services. You basically can carry the body with you everywhere, put it on a mantle, um, and pass it on to a family member if you want, or they can put it in urns. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do now. But at one time, they were very specific. They would want to lie down with their fathers and be buried as like a family plot. My brother-in-law has one in Kentucky. All the Childers family is in Kentucky, and every time there's a death, they go all the way down to Kentucky, and then they have their own burial plot. Someday, my sister will be buried there, along with Rob and their family, and it's their family burial plot. And so it's important to them that they continue to bury people in that plot. All their family gets buried there. So I get the idea behind it. We're just different. We're just getting away from that, I think, in some aspects of things. And he obviously in verse 31, he asked Joseph to swear to him. And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. And Israel did reverence, leaning on the staff, on the top of his staff. In chapter 48, it picks up, "Now it came about after these things that Joseph was told, 'Behold, your father is sick.' So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him. When it was told to Jacob, 'Behold, your son Joseph has come to you,' Israel collected his strength and sat up in bed. Then Jacob said to Joseph, 'God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. And he said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous, and I will make you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your descendants after you for an everlasting possession. Now your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. But your offspring that have been born after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the names of their brothers in their inheritance. Now, as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died to my sorrow in the land of Canaan on the journey, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrath." That is Bethlehem today. So we have this situation where now he's getting ready to die, and he says something amazing. You know there's 12 tribes of Israel, but you'll notice that Joseph doesn't actually become one of the tribes, but Manasseh and Ephraim do. So what happened is a little bit of a basically saying they're mine now. He's saying these are my own children. Joseph, your immediate children that you had in Egypt have become my children. They'll be part of the 12 tribes of Israel. But Joseph will not be. But any of Joseph's sons after this, after Manasseh and Ephraim, will no longer be part of the 12 tribes of Israel. So what he did is he gave him a double blessing, because he gave both of his sons the opportunity to be part of the 12 tribes of Israel. Not him, but both of his sons, which would have been a reward, right? Joseph wouldn't have looked at that and went, "What? I'm not part of it? Well, come on." No, he would have looked at it as this is a blessing that both of his children would be carried on in the names of Israel forever. And if we look at it, it's kind of more important than our own, right? We kind of would like the best for our children more than we'd like the best for us, especially when we get older in life. And we've seen some great things. We look back and we say, wow, if my child could have this, I would rather my child have it than me have it. So, those type of things. So I get the logic behind that. I hope you do too. And then he reminds him of Rachel's death and where she's buried. And interesting that Bethlehem is where Jesus would be born. It's where Rachel was buried. And it just makes a connection, right? If you're into that kind of thing, then you can make a connection. that out of the line of Israel would come Jesus, who would be born in Bethlehem, the lowest of all cities, but a city that's favored because that's where Rachel was buried. So interesting, but I mean, if you want to dive into that stuff, there's a lot to dive into, and numbers and coincidences that aren't coincidences, and all of those kind of things. So when we get to verse 8, it says, when Israel saw Joseph's son, he said, who are these? Joseph said to his father, these are my sons whom God has given me. Here. So he said, bring them to me, please, that I may bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were so dim from that age that he could not see. I think we all relate to that. Then Joseph brought them close to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your children as well. So in this tender moment, he is reminding Joseph that he never believed he would see Joseph again. But to see Joseph's children is quite a blessing. In verse 12, he says, then Joseph took them from his knees and bowed with his face to the ground. Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand towards Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand towards Israel's right, and he brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left on the hand of Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. He blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and may my name live on in them, and the names of my father, Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. So there is a adoption ritual taking place here. He is saying they're mine, and he wants God to look at them as his. What that means is the blessing that God gave to Israel, he's asking God to add these two to the blessing. They weren't born in his household, they weren't born in his family, but he's asking to be adopted into them. And we know that that is carried out. But here we have, when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him. And he grasped his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son. I know. He will also become a people, and he also will be great. However, his younger brother, shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. He blessed them that day, saying, by you, Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and bring you back to the lands of your fathers. And I give you one portion more than your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. So Joseph reaches out to grab Jacob's right hand, trying to remove it from Ephraim's head. Joseph tells his dad, you're doing it all wrong. But obviously, this was by purpose because God had told him to do that. So we see Jacob responds to Joseph's attempt to correct him by saying, I know. He's telling him it's not a mistake, it's intentional. Manasseh will become a great people. The fact that he's not receiving the greater blessing doesn't mean he still won't receive great things. Nevertheless, the younger boy, Ephraim, is selected by God to be even greater. In fact, the name Ephraim will become a synonym for the northern tribes in total. In the same way that the southern tribes are named for the greatest tribe, Judah, Ephraim won't necessarily be larger than the other tribes or even larger than Manasseh, but Ephraim will be honored. In this way, the birthright and seed promise holders become the two most prominent tribes in the entire nation. So we see this played out. And when we get to Genesis 49, we have, then Jacob summoned his sons and said, assemble yourselves, and I may tell you what will befall you in the days to come. Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to your Israel, your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power, uncontrolled as water. You shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Now, this is going to enter into a chapter of some interesting things, and buckle up, you follow along here. Jacob doesn't proceed in exact birth order. Instead, he addresses the son of each wife in turn, beginning with Leah, then moving to the two concubines, and then ending with the sons of Rachel. Under normal circumstances, we would have expected Reuben to receive the birthright and the best blessing, but instead Reuben is given a rebuke, but not before Jacob reminds Reuben of what could have been his. Jacob first says that Reuben was the firstborn, the beginning of Jacob's strength, and the son who was positioned to be preeminent son in the family. But Reuben forfeited his opportunity. In Hebrew, Jacob says Reuben was boiling over like water, which suggests Reuben's uncontainable lust and undisciplined nature. He was disqualified from receiving these blessings in the inheritance because of his lust for his father's wife. Reuben's prophecy is a reminder that men and women who do not act to discipline the flesh and control their lusts run the risk of disqualifying themselves the blessings the Lord may offer. In verse 5, it says, Simeon and Levi are brothers, their swords and implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let not my glory be united with your assembly, because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. This is not the moment endearment you wanted with your father, by the way. Next, Jacob deals with his second and third sons of Leah, Simon and Levi. These brothers are forever connected with their misdeeds in Shechem. They said they were defending their sister's honor, but their motives were evil, according to Jacob. They had vengeance and wrath in their hearts, and they reacted in anger. They murdered men and made their animals lame, meaning they cut the tendons in their leg to render them useless to anyone. So the Lord, speaking through Jacob, declares that this sin will receive a punishment in the history of Israel. The judgment falls on their seed in that it would be scattered. Neither Simeon nor Levi received land of their own. Instead, they lived entirely inside other tribes' lands. By pronouncing these judgments on the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, God wasn't acting unfairly. Historians have noted that these individual sons of Jacob seem to pass their personalities on to their respective tribes. The tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and even Levi showed characteristics of their fathers, and therefore the Lord could be seen protecting Israel from these men and their defects spreading among the tribes. Kings would not arise from these lines after their nature. Kings with the immoral nature and unrestrained emotions of these men. This was the blessing to Israel. In verse 8, it says, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up, and he couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who dares rouse him up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. He tieth his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine, and his teeth are white from milk. Now, this is a lot of prophecy in here. I imagine at this point, Jacob's son is definitely fidgeting in this moment. They're not getting the blessings they wanted. Judah is the first true blessing, and along with Joseph, it's the longest blessing. In verse 8, Jacob awards Judah with a preeminence over his brothers. This was the closest sons get up to appointing a patriarch to replace Jacob. In this case, the entire tribe received the prominence with the family. The tribe of Judah would ultimately see other tribes bowing down, and prophecy of the coming king of Israel from Judah. So he is talking about Jesus. So he intended Judah to be the king. And if you know, Jesus came from the line of Judah in the house of David, who, by the way, was Judah. So not only did they get David and Solomon and some of the kings from there, but they also got Jesus. That's the reference to everything will bow down to him. And the grapes are basically the blood of Jesus will cover their sins. In verse 13, he picks up with Zebulun, will dwell at the seashore, and he shall be a haven for ships, and his flank shall be towards Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. When he saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a slave at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider falls backward. For your salvation I await, O Lord. As for Gad, raiders shall raid him, but he will raid at their heels. As for Asher, his food shall be rich, and he will yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. For Zebulun, Jacob says his tribe will dwell at the seashore and the border of Sidon, the historical land of the Phoenicians. The problem is the territory assigned to Zebulun is in the book of Joshua doesn't border the sea. The tribe is entirely landlocked. On the other hand, Ezekiel 48 describes the territory of each tribe during the millennial kingdom. And in that age to come, Zebulun does have territory on the sea in the northwest corner of the nation. This is further proof that this is prophecy. Then pithy descriptions, as Issachar becomes a strong donkey lying down between sheep. Penn communicate a lot about his character. He's physically strong, given over to manual labor and service, but in lying down, he has a lazy streak and is not particularly ambitious. The tribe of Dan, Jacob says that in keeping with the meaning of the name, this tribe will be judges. The tribe of Dan produces Samson, the most prominent of the judges, but Dan was also the first tribe to practice idolatry. And Dan began the rebellion that eventually split the nation of Israel. So Jacob says relatively little about Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. Gad's territory was the easternmost border of Israel across the Jordan, so he was vulnerable to raids from desert tribes. The tribes were excellent warriors and defended Israel well. Asher is given some of the best land in the nation, very fertile ground. As a result, that nation comes to enjoy rich food, which literally means oily food, as symbolic of richness. His tribe will produce delicacies for kings. For Naphtali, Jacob says the tribe will move like a doe let loose. It's a reference to the way Naphtali's territory is very mountainous, creating a degree of independence among the tribes. So now he gets to Joseph in verse 22. Joseph is a fruitful bow by spring. Its branches run over a wall. The archers bitterly attacked him and shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained firm and his arms are agile. From the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from the shepherd, the stone of Israel, from the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with the blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and the womb, the blessing of your father, have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors. Up to the uttermost bound of everlasting hills, may they be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of the one who distinguished among his brothers. Joseph is richly blessed, the most blessed of the sons of Jacob, in keeping with his award of his birthright. Remember, the blessings were measured in way. Jacob granted a double portion to Joseph's two sons, but Joseph himself also received Jacob's land in Shechem. Nevertheless, the tribe of Joseph, which has become two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, is the most blessed tribe. Their blessing is pictured as a fruitful tree extended in branches outside the walls of the orchard. So finally, in verse 25 and 26, Jacob speaks of the tremendous blessing Joseph received from the Lord, a blessing that even exceeded that given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Benjamin is the next blessing in verse 27, is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, and in the evening he divides the spoils. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them, every one of them, with a blessing appropriate to him. This is not the greatest blessing on the planet for his brothers. And if it probably didn't help their hatred of Joseph for so long, being the favored one. But Benjamin is told he'll be a warring tribe, basically, often victorious and so successful, he will divide the spoils with his brothers. So it's not totally bad, but in chapter 49, verse 29, he says, then he charged them and said to them, I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron, the Hittite. In that cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought, along with the field for Ephron, the Hittite, for a burial site. There they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it purchased from the sons of Heth. When Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew his feet into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. So now we have the official death of Jacob, ending in chapter 49. We're going to This is going to be a long one, but we're going to finish the book of Genesis. In chapter 50 and verse 1, it says, Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. Now 40 days were required for it, for such is a period required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. But we do not, Joseph mourns his father's passing with obvious sadness and loss. But everybody shared in that sadness. For 70 days, the land of Egypt wept. When the days of mourning for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found favor in your sight, please speak to Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Behold, I am about to die in my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. There you shall bury me. Now, therefore, please let me go up and bury my father, then I will return. Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the household of Joseph and his brothers and his father's household. They left only their little ones and their flocks and their herds in the land of Goshen. There also went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great sorrow and sorrowful lamentation. And he observed 7 days mourning for his father. Now, when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians. Therefore, it was named Abal Mizram, which is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had charged them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, which Abraham had brought along with the field for a burial site from Ephron the Hittite. After he buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt and his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, here we go. They said, What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him? So they sent a message to Joseph saying, Your father charged before he died, saying, Thus you shall say to Joseph, Please forgive, I beg you, the transgressions of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now please forgive the transgressions of the servants of God your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, Behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, Do not be afraid, for I am in God's place. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little one. So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Now, it has been a while since this all took place, but Israel dies, and the trickery comes again. We have nowhere in the Bible where it says that Jacob asked his brothers to tell Joseph to forgive him, right? So as far as we know, this is a lie. This is them, once again, being their old brothers and fearing for their own life. But Joseph reminds them that they meant evil, but God meant it for good. God was looking ahead and wanted to save all these people, as a loving God would. And so Joseph doesn't harbor evil in his heart towards his brothers. This is the moment, actually, he proves forgiveness. Because if forgiveness is choosing not to hold it against somebody, then what we're really seeing in this situation is him acting on that. He's not holding against him. He could now. His dad's gone, right? So he could act revenge and no one would hold him accountable. He wouldn't look bad in his dad's eyes or nothing. So that's what his brothers were thinking. Now that dad's gone, we have nobody to protect us. But in actuality, Joseph had proven he had forgiven them. And so the book of Genesis wraps up with 22 now saying, Now Joseph stayed in Egypt and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw the third generation of Ephraim's sons. Also the sons of Machir, the sons of Manasseh, were born on Joseph's knee. Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely take care of you and bring you up from this land to the land which he promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones up from here. So Joseph died at the age of 110 years, and he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. And that ends the book of Genesis. And it'll pick up next week as we start the book of Exodus. And you'll see how there's a time period in between, but we'll talk about that. But Joseph does not want to be buried there. He wants to be buried in his family plot. And he understands his brothers will not get that same privilege that Pharaoh had given Joseph to be able to go and leave the land and bury his dead. And so, but we have a great image of forgiveness, and I hope you don't miss that. Forgiveness is choosing not to hold it against that person and then acting in love and kindness towards that person that you have forgiven proves that you have forgiven them. Remember that. Let us pray. Lord, as always, we thank you for the opportunity to look at the book of Genesis and to learn from the whole book. We've done a lot in 29 weeks. And Lord, I just pray that you would help us to be like Joseph in our lives and forgive our enemies and love those who do us wrong. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a good week, everyone.